All right, so I'm going to start today, like Bob said, we're going to talk about mindset. I'm going to speed up because we only have about a half an hour to get through. And I want to start by reading an excerpt from this scrapbook that I received almost 20 years ago. And I want you to, if you need to, close your eyes. Do not fall asleep. But I want you to try to listen to every word. When I'm done, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the young author who wrote it. It's entitled, Always Remember. You should always tell people that you love them. You should love a lot. Make a lot of wishes and tell people your wishes because that is how they come true. Have ambition. Be strong. Never settle. Ask for help. Give compliments. Never envy others. Make every person you can feel special. Don't dwell on the past, just learn from it. Feel bad for those who try to put you down. They only lack something within themselves. Being unhappy is just a waste of time and energy. Hate is a very strong word. Appearances are very deceiving. Chasing temporary highs will never make you truly happy. And last but not least, do not take a single moment or person for granted in your life ever. So, as I said, 20 years ago, 20 summers ago, my wife and I got this scrapbook. And these powerful words were written by a young 21-year-old girl who was in the summer before her senior year of college. Who remembers the summer before your senior year of college? Not a lot of decisions, right? It was like, do we go down the shore this weekend or hang out in the city? Like, what bar do we go to? And she was pregnant and about to give her baby up for adoption. And during the pregnancy, she kept this scrapbook. And you think about all of what kind of mindset she could have, right? Oh my God, this is the summer before my senior year of college. It's my first summer being 21. I can't go to the bars with my friends. I can't put a bathing suit on and go hang out on the beach. And instead of having that thought, she chose to do something not for herself, something beautiful to give to her then unborn son and his future parents. So both of our kids are adopted. And when we went to get our first son, 20 Augusts ago, this August will be 20 years, our social worker, right here, Emily, she handed us this scrapbook kept by the birth mom. And there's amazing quotes in here from Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Mother Teresa, all these incredibly powerful notes that she wrote and messages that she wrote. And we went from never even thinking about the birth mom. As selfish as that sounds now, just never even gave it much thought, gave her much thought, to, oh my God, I want to hug her and thank her right this second. And it's amazing how your viewpoint can change. Because think about it. Here's this girl at the most pivotal time in her life, going through all kinds of adversity, and she chose to do this beautiful thing. And she wasn't again thinking that it's the worst. All these "it's the worst" phrases. How many people use that phrase? It's the worst. Be honest. Who took this Google here? It's the worst. John drove down from Connecticut. How's the traffic in New York? Awesome. It's the worst, right? We stub our toe. It's the worst, right? Brain freezes. We use this phrase all the time. It's the worst. And the reality is, more times than not, it's not the worst. There's some things that are the worst. Most of the time when we use that phrase, it's not the worst. One thing that I know to be true 100% of the time is we get what we think about. So if all we're thinking about is the worst, we're always looking at things as the worst, bad things are going to happen. So just to give you a little bit more perspective, a couple years later, we decided to adopt again. And it took us a few years before we got placed, but we were fortunate enough to get our daughter. And first time around, we wanted our adoption to be as normal as possible. So my wife and I are both Caucasian. We wanted a Caucasian baby. As you can see, my son's about as Caucasian as you can get. He needs SPF 900 just to open the refrigerator. Our daughter is half African American, a quarter Puerto Rican, and a quarter Caucasian. And just to give you guys some perspective on the birth mom. So her mom was just shy of her 16th birthday, and she had a 16-month-old son at home. She chose us because of our son, because she wanted her baby girl to have a big brother. Because she had a biological big brother, she wanted her to have a adopted big brother. And we can learn a lot from these two young women who, we're all guilty of having that negative mindset, right? But here's two people who created these beautiful outcomes from tremendous adversity. Because it's how you handle adversity that leads to success. It leads to beautiful things. So we're going to get a little lighter here. We may get contentious with guys like John, but how many Birds fans do we have here? What's this play? Philly Special, right? Philly, Philly, Philly Special. Anybody know the situation? I know Bob does. Anybody know the situation here? The game, obviously we know the game, right? What we got? Fourth down, yep. Do we know when time? Like time of the clock, when it was? There you go. So here it is. 38 seconds to go. End of the half. Eagles up by 3. Here's a situation where, as an Eagles fan, we're yelling at the screen, kick the damn field goal, right? Let's go up by 6, go into the half, and we'll figure it out. The other context here is that the Patriots had the second half kickoff, right? So they skipped the ball to start the second half. So there's a couple choices. And there's a lot of adversity and negative things that can be going through Nick Foles' head, right? He just threw an incomplete pass on 3rd and goal at the 1. So he could be coming over going, God, I should have had that pass. All the things you can think about that we all were probably yelling at the screen at the time. Maybe not John, but everybody else was yelling at the screen. But instead, has anybody heard the mic'd up version of this? Yeah. What's he say? They call timeout. He comes over to the sideline to Doug Peterson. The biggest moment in either of their two coaching and quarterback lives. And what's Nick Foles say?
You want Philly Philly?
We want Philly Philly. And he says it like he was talking about where to go for dinner. You want a cheesesteak? Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Nick Foles, equally calm, says, yeah, let's do it. That easy. What I found out later, actually just a few months ago, I heard Nick Foles speak. They started working on that play in training camp. They were just waiting. They actually were going to use it in the NFC Championship game against the Vikings. But as you remember, they smoked the Vikings, so they didn't need to use it. And they saved it for exactly that moment. And that's the turning point, man. If they kick a field goal there, they may lose the game. If they don't get it on 4th down, they may lose they'll probably definitely lose the game, right? The momentum completely shifts. Instead, they get the touchdown, as everybody knows, and they go on to win the game. Nobody got that mindset better than Michael Jordan. In my opinion, the best team sport winning athlete of all time. He said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and miss. I failed over and over and over again. And what does he say? I suck. Don't pass me the ball anymore. This is the worst. No. He says, and that is why I succeed. Because it's through those failures that true success can be achieved. If there's non-sports people, I apologize because there's another sports slide. Who can name the 3 people on the screen? Somebody. Give me Reggie, Kobe, Brett Favre. 2 of them grew up within 10 miles of here, right? Kobe's from Lower Marion, probably less than 5 miles down the street. Reggie's from Cheltenham, 10 miles away. And there's one thing that these three guys have in common. Anybody guess what they have in common? They are the #1 failures in their sport. For their position in their sport, they hold the record for the #1 failure stat. I'll tell you why. Brett Favre threw more interceptions than anybody ever, right? That's failure. That's how quarterbacks can be measured on failure. He's also a 3-time MVP, 11 Pro Bowls, three All-Pros, Super Bowl champ, threw 508 touchdowns. Reggie Jackson, this is where I get John into the conversation, right? He's a Yankees fan. Struck out more than any other player ever. John, what was Reggie's nickname? You know?
Mr. October.
Mr. October. Why?
Thank you.
Why Mr. October?
World Series.
That's when the playoffs in the World Series. Now the World Series bleed into November, but back then everything happened in October. And that's when he became clutch. So MVP, 2-time World Series MVP, 14-time All-Star, 5-time World Series champ, and he hit 563 home runs. Kobe missed more shots than anybody ever. Yet, if you go to any playground in this country, and probably all over the world, if a kid's taking a jump shot, what do they say?
Kobe.
Kobe, right? It's because Kobe made a lot, too. He's an MVP, 18-time All-Star, 15-time All-NBA. Crazy. 5-time NBA champ like Reggie, 2-time Finals MVP, and he scored almost 34,000 points. The other thing that these three guys, they all knew that it's how you handle failure that leads to success. And it's only through failure that you really can achieve success. All three of them, the other thing they had in common is they're all inducted into their sports Hall of Fames. Get out of sports just a little bit. Probably the most successful person that I quote here is Walt Disney. And if you know the story of Walt Disney, he went through a lot. He had kind of a rough life. He said, all the adversity I've had in my life, all my troubles and obstacles have strengthened me. You may not know it. You may not realize it when it happens. But a kick in the teeth may be the best thing in the world for you. I was fortunate enough to have my first big kick in the teeth at a very young age. How many Delco people? I grew up in Delaware County. I'm the youngest of 5. Any other big families? Did anybody else? Brenda, did your mom call you every name of the before she got to your name? So I grew up Rosemary, Richard, Tony, Diane, Stephen, whatever the hell your name is. That was my whole name. Rosemary, Richard, Tony, Diane, Stephen, whatever the hell your name is. No, figuratively kicked in the teeth. No, it was not literally kicked in the teeth. I may have been kicked in the teeth. So I grew up in Delaware County, youngest of 5. My dad was a high school dropout from Bartram High School in Southwest Philadelphia. He went into the Marines. He went into construction and got into gambling. He became addicted to gambling. When I was 6 years old, he left. There's 6-year-old me, my Batman pajamas, waiting for my dad to come home, which I did often, and he never did. Taught me something, taught me an early lesson, that early kick in the teeth. And what I realized over the years is he missed out on a lot. He missed out on all the games, all the graduations, all the weddings. And he was on the run because he was in and out of jail. But he also would write checks to the wrong people. And you can imagine an Italian dude in construction in Southwest Philly who the wrong people would be. He would write checks to the wrong people, bad checks, write another check to them and pay them off. He was constantly waiting for that next big game where he could win and settle it all. It never happened. So for about 30 years, he lived in Las Vegas. He was my parents when they got married in 1954. And again, he missed all the weddings. He missed all his kids' weddings. He missed all his grandchildren being born. And he also missed all the funerals. He was one of 7, and he missed his parents' funeral and all 6 of his siblings' funerals because he was on the run constantly. Back in 2017, January 2017, I went to my Aunt Rosie's funeral. She's pictured right there. She was the last of his siblings to pass and the last funeral that he missed. And I couldn't stop staring at this picture. Number one, it's the only picture of all 9 Grandizios. My grandparents seated in the front, my grandfather, my grandmother, my uncle, my aunts, and my dad in the back. And the other thing I realized was that they died in the exact order that they're standing. So my grandfather died before my grandmother. My Uncle Johnny, who I've been told I look like, died first. He was 3rd oldest. No rhyme or reason. And I thought of this not as a still shot. Right? If we all got together and got a picture right now, it's not a still shot. You're pulling a picture together at a wedding. People are on the dance floor, people are at the bar, people are sitting down, you're kind of just scrambling to get into a spot to take the picture. And they died in the exact order. So my Aunt Angie died next. The baby of the family, the 7th, died 3rd. The oldest, my Aunt Ann, died 4th. My Aunt Marion, then my Aunt Rosie, whose funeral I went to, and here was the black sheep of the family, the guy who missed everything, and he was still alive. And I sat there and I stared at this picture, and for the first time in my life, I went from, as an adult, never even thinking of my dad, never, to, I think I need to go see him. So, in February of 2017, 39 years after he left, I went out to see him. I don't really have an explanation why, but I knew I just needed to do it. It wasn't to get answers, it wasn't to be vindictive, it was just, I needed to meet him and have a conversation. So, oddly enough, on February 14th, on Valentine's Day, I actually went to a conference, and the conference was called Family Reunion, which is crazy. Can't make that up. And it took me like 5 years to even realize, wait, that conference is called Family Reunion. I went out and I met my dad. 2 of my siblings had conversation, had phone connection with him, so it was not not difficult to find him. And there were a couple good lessons, and I could spend the full time talking about this trip, the 2-day trip, but I'll tell you just 2 things because I want to talk about some other stuff. One is that my mom had remarried when I was 8 years old, and my stepdad, not a jealous or vain bone in his body. He's an amazing guy. He's the pop-up. He's the one who went to all the stuff that I said my dad missed. All the graduations, all the childbirths, all the weddings. He's the pop-up to my kids. He's the pop-up to all my nieces and nephews. And I said, do you have any advice for me? And without skipping a beat, he said, yeah, get your picture taken with him and see if he wants to come out for Father's Day weekend. I'm like, all right, I'll get a picture taken with him, but I'm not going to invite him to Father's Day weekend. But it taught me a great lesson as an adoptive dad who may be faced with kids who want to meet their birth parents, that it's not about, there's no jealousy. I shouldn't have jealousy when that happens. So it's a couple good lessons. One funny story. So here's this 85-year-old dude. He's living in a 1-bedroom apartment by himself. So really selfish decisions early on in life lead to a very lonely, sad end of life. So he's living in this 1-bedroom apartment. He's got a TV set with rabbit ears. He's got a flip phone. Like, he is out of touch with anything going on. So we sit, we're talking for a little bit. I say, let's go to lunch. We go out. He's got a walker. He had all kinds of heart meds, pacemaker. The guy was in pretty bad shape. He looks pretty good then. So we go down, and I can see he's looking around trying to figure out where my car was. We're in Vegas. I just flew in that day. And a black sedan comes in. Guy gets out. He sees that he has a walker, so he pops the trunk. Guy gets out. He says, hey, Steve. I say, hey, John, yeah. We put his walker in the trunk, close the trunk. I help him get in the back seat. I get in the other side, close the doors, and we go away. My dad leans over and he goes, Steve, did you have this driver? He had no idea. He thought, man, my kid has hit it big. We're going to the poker table tonight. Gee, he's got a driver in Vegas. So if you could see his face when I told him about Uber, it was like somebody stole his pup. He was not happy. He was not happy when he heard about that. But lots of lessons from that, but really where I learned a lot of my lessons, and we actually have one of our board members, Fred DeSillo here, is through Little Smiles. So I was fortunate enough to bring Little Smiles to Philadelphia back in 2006, so about 19 years ago. And I love this quote from Mother Teresa: "We shall never know all the good that a simple smile can do." And so we are kind of like a make-a-wish, but we're not the bucket list items. We're the everyday smiles that we give to kids, not just sick kids, but kids in homeless shelters, kids going through abuse, chronic conditions. So any kids going through adversity, we bring smiles to their faces. And we do that by acting as a silent checkbook for the people who work on the front lines. And through the years, I've met so many families and so many kids, and it's really shaped my perspective, none more than Jaden Kavetsky. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jaden. Jaden lives in Norristown, so 10 miles maybe from here. He grew up, his parents were addicts, both of his parents were addicts. He's the middle of 3 boys, so there's his 2 brothers next to him. When he was 5 years old, he was diagnosed with cancer. He got treated at CHOP, went in and out of chemo treatments till he was about 10 years old when he was deemed cancer-free. You can see even there, the kid smiling all the time, even going through cancer treatments. His preteen and teenage years were pretty normal. Played sports, did pretty well in school, always smiling, and always with his big brother, Stephen. 3 years difference between Jaden and Stephen, and he hung out with Stephen anytime he could. One of those nights was February 20th, 2023. So 2.5 years ago. He was in the back seat of the car. He and Stephen, friends were in the front seat, and they got into a major car accident. Stephen was killed on the spot, and Jaden was left a quadriplegic. Grew up with his grandparents. Parents are addicts. Survived cancer. Look at his face. That's in a wheelchair. I met Jaden 2 summers ago. We go to Shriners every single month. We feed pizza, and it's called a junk food run. We fill up the shopping carts with all the stuff that all of us would love to throw in our shopping carts. And we go and bring snacks and pizza and everything. And I'm serving pizza, and I see Jaden getting fed a slice of pizza from his nurse. And he goes, "This is the best pizza ever." And I'm like, dude, I gotta meet you. So I developed a relationship with Jaden over the last couple years, and I'm like, man, you gotta, people need a dose of Jaden. And I said, you need to speak, you need to do it. He goes, I want to start a podcast. So I'm like, dude, let's do it. So we started a podcast in January, Little Smiles. It's on YouTube, at Little Smiles PA. We started a podcast, and this was our 2nd episode. And I said, when you go back and you look at the first episodes of Cheers, The Office, and Seinfeld, you look back and you're like, oh my God, these were awful. So I just said, let's just do it. We're gonna look back and hopefully say that they're awful someday, but let's just do it. So I get a StreamYard account. We do a couple. This was our 2nd one we did in February. Our guest was Elizabeth Martinez. She's from Honduras. She's 12 years old. She has brittle bone disease. At the time, she had 65 broken bones in her life. She's had 9 surgeries at Shriners over the years. And I'm telling you, there's not a more confident, positive person I've ever met in my life. So we're going through this podcast. I get a pop-up that says my battery's about to die. I go scrambling to find it, and before I can find it, I'm gone. And I thought the whole thing would shut down. Lo and behold, 3 hours later, I'm home, I plug in, and and I see that the thing goes for 40-some minutes. So I go and listen to it, and Jaden and Elizabeth had their own little podcast for 20-some minutes, and it was beautiful. And it hit me. It's how you handle adversity that leads to success. Here's two kids that have been dealt crazy adversity. This was nothing. So the old dude's out of here, that's great. Now we can actually have a podcast. They started talking about therapy. They were showing all paintings that they did. It was absolutely beautiful. And all of the kids that I met got me ready for the summer of 2018. So it was the biggest kick in the teeth, not a literal one. Biggest kick in the teeth that I had gotten was then. It was Father's Day weekend, so it was right around now. And I started feeling unwell. Started on Friday night, went through the weekend. It ended up going 33 consecutive days. I had 33 days of fevers, headaches, loss of appetite, extreme fatigue. I was a 6 a.m. gym goer. I was sleeping until 8:30 and crashed on my couch at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for 33 consecutive days. I went to 4 different doctors, had my blood drawn by a couple different of the doctors, and nobody could figure out what the heck it was. They tested for Lyme and mono and West Nile virus and all this crazy stuff. Finally, on day 34, after 103.5 fever, I went to the ER at Jefferson. They admitted me right away. They weighed me. I was 20 pounds lighter. Here's me a month before I got sick. So I was like 235 pounds. I was 20 pounds down when they admitted me on July 19th that year. They started running tests, and they found bacteria in my bloodstream. I said, oh, great. So they started pumping me with antibiotics. Within a couple of days, I felt better, but they kept me in the hospital to run tests on my brain and my heart, because that's where bacteria can migrate. Long story short, after days and days of testing, one of the tests that they did twice within a 5-day period. It's called a transesophageal echocardiogram. It's a really fancy term for a camera knocking you out and shoving the camera down your throat so that they can take a little better look at the heart. Second time I had this done, I woke up with the cardiac radiologist this far from my face telling me that I needed open heart surgery. I had my then 12-year-old son there. He went running into the hospital crying. My wife went chasing after him, and my then 8-year-old daughter just sobbed in my lap. And I sat there and I'm like, all right, how are you going to spin this? So I thought, how many parents? I thought of all the people who I met, all the kids that I met who were sick. Look in the parents' eyes and how helpless the look was. Because every single one of us would do anything to take the cancer or the paralysis or the open heart surgery, whatever, from our kids. So immediately I said, I'm the lucky guy. I don't have to go to bed tonight to pray to take this from Emmy and Marshall. I have it. And I started saying, better me than my kids. Better me than my kids. And that, even when the world around me was saying, why did they catch this sooner? Why this, why that? I'm like, dude, that's not helping me right now. Better me than my kids. I got this. They're good. So I met with the doctor, the surgeon, and I said, just lay it out for me. I want to know exactly what's going on. He said, well, where the infection is lodged is between your aortic and mitral valves. It's a really complicated surgery, probably a 10 to 20% mortality rate. To make matters worse, it was scheduled for the day before my son's 13th birthday, so August 9th, 2018, day before his birthday. Went through surgery, had successful surgery. I'm fast forwarding, knowing I'm getting the hook here soon. So I had successful surgery. It is impossible to paint a picture of somebody who was sick for a month, for 33 days, lost 20-some pounds, then was in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks, and then had 12-hour open heart surgery. So I was wheeled out of my room at 7 a.m., wheeled into cardiac ICU at 7 p.m. During that time, they basically reworked my heart, rebuilt it. They scraped away an infection, they patched it with a bovine, a cow patch. They replaced my aortic valve with an artificial valve and root. They did a vein graft in my left leg and did a right coronary bypass. 12 long hours. Because you're like this during surgery, I felt like I had knives in my shoulders. At that point, I was 40 pounds lighter. I looked like a Holocaust survivor. So there's me 11 days after surgery. This is 3 months after the May picture. You also come out of surgery, or I did, with a portable pacemaker. So, pacemaker, 2 wires that went up under my gown, connected to 2 other wires and up into my heart. Because where they scraped away the infection, they didn't know if the heart would come back, if the conduction system would work in the heart. So, they, lowest of low days was 4 days after surgery. Doctor came in and said, you need a permanent pacemaker. And up until that point, man, I as weak and frail and everything else that I was still good. I was like, better me than my kids, I'm good. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't stop crying. And sometimes that happens, right? We all, no matter how positive we are, there's crap that we get kicked in the teeth. And for whatever reason, that screamed old and unhealthy to me. And I didn't think of myself as old and unhealthy until that doctor walked in the door and told me that. And I needed a sign. Who believes in angels? I know Danny does. So he talked about it last year at this event. And I'm not talking about the ones with white wings and halos, but there's people that come into your life just at the right time, right? Just at the right time. And I needed that. I needed some kind of sign to snap me out of old and unhealthy and get me ready for a second surgery to put a pacemaker in. So next day, get a knock on the door. Knocks on the door in hospitals are not, can I come in? Knocks on the door are, I'm coming in as the door's open. Or as I'm knocking. And every 4 days you get a different nursing rotation of 2 nurses. This was the first time that I had this. I'd been in for about 3 weeks at this point. This was the first time I had seen this nurse. And she comes in, it was just my wife and I, and she says, do you recognize me? And it took a second, but we realized it was Emily. So, our social worker, from when we adopted our son, the one who handed us this scrapbook with a heart on the front back in 2005. 13 years later, she had just graduated. In fact, she graduated on May 22nd from Jefferson. I wasn't sick on May 22nd. She gets hired by Jeff. I get sick. I go in the car, have surgery. She's my nurse my last 4 days in the hospital. August 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th. There's no odds, right? That night, it was the night before pacemaker surgery, got put to the test. Because I went right back to better me than my kids. Once Emily came in, I'm like, all right, here we go, let's go. So the next day I was getting ready for pacemaker surgery. That night, they take you out and they make you walk. Like literally my walk was to that wall and back every day, 3 times a day, just to make sure your legs don't clot. So I get back from the walk, and when you get into bed, you can't do anything with your upper body. You just kind of sit your butt on the bed, they lift your legs up, and when they did that, my worst nightmare happened. One of the cords came undone on my portable pacemaker. My heart rate went from 80 to 25, like that. Every ounce of warmth left my body. I was completely drenched in sweat. Emily could probably still feel me squeezing her hand. She was to my left. Another nurse was to my right. My wife was right at the end of the bed. And I told her I loved her and said goodbye. Thankfully, the attending cardiologist came up from the floor below, ran up the stairs, came flying in. Up until that point, I prided myself on nobody seeing like my naked butt or anything. At that point, I'm like, dude, flip it up. Just make sure I don't die here. He came in, he plugged me back in. My heart rate went back to 80. Again, drenched in sweat. Next day, I have successful pacemaker surgery. And I get out of the hospital on August 17, 2018. exactly 13 years to the day after Emily was at our house with Marshall, our son. So I'll leave you with this, just because I know we're a couple minutes over. Life's going to kick you in the teeth. Never stops kicking us in the teeth. Some are small, some are big, some are just traffic, some idiot cutting you off on the way home from here. I just say, always know that when that happens, that the best could be right around the corner. We're in a networking event. There's a lot of partners here, clients, all different people. Make sure you take the end of always remember from Marshall's birth mom to heart. Do not take a single moment or person in your life for granted, ever. So thank you guys. I want you to, if you have a chance, go to YouTube, Little Smiles. Check out, if you don't check out any of the other 4 episodes, check out February's with Elizabeth. She's amazing. Again, if I could have Jade and Elizabeth here, I would just sit down and shut up because they are unbelievable. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.